All right, hello. Let's get started. I'm Jackson Lord. This is my final presentation for the American Roots course and for Dr. Erica Haskell. Before we get started, let me just say hi here in the corner. My normal screen sharing feature isn't working, something to do with my laptop, but this format should be fine. The only issue I have is this link here isn't going to be able to play. If you could play it within the context of the presentation or after the fact on your own time, whatever works best, that'd be great because it is a very nice video. So without further ado, let's get started. Again, my name is Jackson Lord, and we're going to be discussing the Cowboy Rides Away tour live from Cowboy Stadium. This was one of George Strait's, well, this was George Strait's final concert, one of his best concerts, his best tour, and it was essentially his victory lap. This was his final tour, final chance for fans to go and get to see him, and it did very successfully because of that. And not to mention the fact that he's the king of country, as they say. So that definitely contributed to the incredible turnout he got on this tour. But today we're going to be focusing a little bit more on the final concert itself and basically why it was so great, why it was so influential, and why it was seen as one of the pinnacles of live country touring. So let's get into George Strait's career in country music. He had 30 years performing, touring, 30-year career containing 60 #1 hits. He's third to only Elvis Presley and the Beatles with the most gold and platinum albums in the history of music, and was also inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame while still recording music, which is a very rare feat. Very few artists are able to do that while they're still in the midst of their career. He sold 100 million records worldwide, and all of this points to the fact that he's the king of country, titled the king of country, for all of these successes and awards that he is revered with. So specifically for this Cowboy Rides Away tour, this was his last tour, his final tour, last chance for fans to get to see him. On September 26, 2012, he announced his retirement for touring. So fans were sent into a bit of a frenzy, like, how are we going to see him one more time? I need to see him one more time. And these requests were answered with one last tour of 47 shows, starting in Texas and ending in Texas. And this was the Cowboy Rides Away tour. It extended through 2013 and 2014 with, like I said, 47 shows, and all the tickets sold out within hours. So that shows the appeal and the draw that George Strait had and has. This was essentially his victory lap. He went all in for this tour, packing it with special guests, all very nameworthy, all could sell out an arena on their own. But the fact that they're showing up for George Strait and taking part in this celebratory tour and basically his victory lap points to how important he is for country music and how big of an entity he is in even other huge artists' minds. Furthermore, to add to like the heartfelt nature of this tour, he had a partnership with Wounded Warrior Foundation, which he was helping servicemen to get mortgage-free housing, service people to get mortgage-free housing. And during each show, he would pause the music and take a moment on stage to call up service people, excuse me, and reward them with mortgage-free housing. This would happen at each show and just really contribute to basically the overall culture in country music, greater than the country music itself, and bringing charity into it, and just really adding to this nostalgic and heartfelt vibe of this whole tour. People will be sad to see him go, but his work isn't done. He is still in the community and still supporting the fans right back. So the entire tour was very grand, very massive. It was essentially his victory lap. But the final show live from Cowboy Stadium was even bigger. This was literally the last chance to see George Strait live in concert. So this show was incredibly massive. It took place on a Saturday, June 7th in 2014, drew 104,793 people, which broke attendance records for indoor stadiums, for concerts in general. It set a record for the largest gross at a single show country concert with $18 million. The grand finale all came to realization at this last show from Cowboys Stadium. Very fitting, being at Cowboys Stadium. Even more fitting, his last show, his last song was The Cowboy Rides Away. A little bit cliche, but that's definitely a good ride out for the King of Country. So now I would like to show that performance for The Cowboy Rides Away. If you could click on the link right now and just watch that, that would be great. I'll give you a moment. If you can't do it right now, that's fine. But essentially that performance was his outro. That was his ride out, his final goodbye through this very fitting song. You could see in the video, people on stage are getting very emotional. The fans are getting very emotional, and everyone is just very celebratory of George Strait's performance that night for his 30-year career and the whole notion of the Cowboy riding away. The tour and this concert were met with amazing critical acclaim, only got positive reviews. I saw one review calling his shows an embarrassment of riches, as you see with his guest list, his arenas, his stadiums. They definitely went all in for this final tour for him. And another reviewer recognized Strait's compelling stage presence and vocal power throughout the tour. So even at the end of his career, people were praising him for his onstage presence, his vocal tenacity, and this all definitely contributed just to that perfect conclusion to a very, very prominent career in country music. So to compare George Strait's final victory lap, his Cowboy Rides Away tour, to another very similar victory lap, we saw a very similar occurrence with Kobe Bryant, late great NBA star, an NBA legend, a very similar reputation in the NBA to what George Strait had in country music. Kobe wasn't seen as the king of the NBA, but for most of his career, he certainly was at the top of his game, at the top of the competition, and was seen as such. Similar awards, similar successes, and similar reverence from his peers and his fans. And both of these people had a very similar victory lap at the end of their career. For Kobe Bryant, it was his 20th season. He was retiring from the NBA, and he announced it prior to that season. So basically, this was his victory tour. This season was his victory lap. So for each game, fans would thank him, cheer for him, even though he was on the other team. They would give him nostalgic videos and moments on the Megatron, and basically just give him plenty of moments throughout the game to be thanked by the fans and for all the people that he's been putting on this show for 20 years. So with Kobe Bryant's last game, he similarly went all in for his last game. He scored 60 points in front of a sold out LA crowd. And after the game, basically just thanked everyone and had a very heartfelt moment with the fans for spending that 20 years with him, watching him for 20 years. And so that 20th season for Kobe Bryant was essentially his victory lap. He wasn't at the top of his game. He wasn't quite George Strait on his last season, but on his last night, nonetheless, he similarly went all in to how George Strait went all in on his last night in Cowboy Stadium. So on Kobe's last night, Kobe's last game in front of a sold out LA crowd, won the game for the Lakers, scoring 60, and basically gave the fans like one last amazing show. And he had his ride out in his own right. And after the game, it was just a very heartfelt celebration between him and the fans. And he shared a moment to give a speech, and everyone could cheer him on and just thank him for the show that he'd been giving them for 20 years. And appreciate that it's coming to an end, which is sad, but at the same time, kind of reflect on the 20 years that they've had Kobe in their lives and the 20-year journey that took place within NBA, within their own lives, within Kobe's life, and just kind of appreciating that journey in hindsight at the conclusion of his career. And similarly, George Strait, he went all in for this last tour, and he had all the special guests. He had incredible draw. He was going to arenas and stadiums and selling them out, and basically just doing his own victory lap and giving the fans the chance to thank him for the last 30 years of country music that he's been giving them, and basically just commemorating the 30 years that he's been in their eyes and in their ears and on their radios. And that's just 30 years of life, 30 years of country music, that the king of country has been there with them that whole time. And in those 30 years, he's been representing country music as they know it. So this last tour was huge for him and huge for his fans to get to see him one last time and give him the ride away, the Cowboy ride out that he deserves at Cowboy Stadium nonetheless. Both of these people played huge roles within the industry that they were in, were great leaders, became the standards for success, and reached heights that people really didn't think were possible. And at the end of that, all you can do is appreciate that career. And both of these people did a great job of making an opportunity for their fans to appreciate them. With George Strait, it was a final tour. It was the Cowboys Rides Away tour. And for Kobe, it was his last game, dropping 60 points, giving the fans one last show. In conclusion, George Strait's final show was one of the most influential and impactful country concerts of all time. He sold out Cowboy Stadium on the Cowboy Rides Away tour, and he ended his concert with the Cowboy Rides Away, the song. That's quite the fitting exit for a country legend of that magnitude. And it could come off as cliche, but to sell out Cowboy Stadium, I think that nips that notion in the bud, and people genuinely appreciate what George Strait has done for the genre of country music, and they can appreciate the prevalence he's had in their lives over the past 30 years, being in country music, but also just being with and around and in front of fans and giving them that experience that he has for his illustrious 30-year career. Ultimately, the final tour was a celebration of George Strait's career, George Strait as a person, and his contributions to country music. And this final tour and this final concert at Cowboy Stadium show the appreciation that fans have for him, even after these 30 years of his career. And all the way to the end of his career, he was still selling out shows and still in front of his fans in grand fashion. And many attribute George Strait to bringing roots back to country. And regardless of where country music is headed now, George Strait will always be remembered as one of the most prominent country artists and one of the most prominent musicians of all time. And it certainly helps your fans to remember you if you throw a victory tour like this, with this kind of magnitude, selling out Cowboy Stadium in such a fitting way for the ultimate Cowboy ride out. So because of all these elements, financial elements and appeal, audience draw, overall body of work, and overall contributions to the country genre and to the community in general, all of this combined and became a magnificent combination for one of the biggest country concerts and one of the biggest concerts of all time. So I thank you for your time. I know I can't answer any questions right now, but I'm more than willing to over email or whatever works best. But thank you for your time. This was George Strait's Cowboy Rides Away tour, his final concert, the Cowboy Rides Away at Cowboy Stadium. Thank you, and thanks for the semester.